technology is fantastic, but where do we need to strategically put in a human touch to make sure that we're getting the right results and that the experience for the candidates and the future employees is really strong?
What was it that really made you want to say, yes, this is what I want to be able to do and continue to create that?
I was introduced to the concept of Saira after way too many drinks with a friend of mine, instantly in love with the vision. And it just so happened that she was looking at the time for someone to help bring the brand and the values and the impact in the UK. So Rob, I don't know, but it was one of those moments.
Yeah.
It was,
sometimes you got to shoot your shot. What does 2025 look like?
Technology is becoming such a vital part of the industry, of so many industries, right? If you are able to automate and simplify some of the more mundane or less human tasks in a hotel, that frees up so much headspace and so much actual time for the teams to celebrate and deliver great hospitality and practice active listening on the front desk rather than having their heads down the whole time, tapping away.
No one likes to wait in a hotel lobby for only 30, 45 minutes just to get checked into the room that you're expecting to be in.
I think if, as a technology company, you're able to say we're supporting a non-profit, say to our customers, we're bringing in newly trained teams who are impassioned by our tech, but also your brand, you start to solve two problems. You're solving the technology problem, you're also supporting the staffing problem as well.
Welcome back. We are have another episode of Hospitable. Really excited. Have Greg Früchtenicht, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Saira Hospitality, which is a really cool nonprofit partnering with luxury and lifestyle hotels to create bespoke schools, to educate and empower local communities in employment and hospitality. And that's how we actually got connected. And we've been trying to record this podcast for about 6 months now, but between your schedule and mine, locking things down, we had to move it around a couple of times. There might have been a little baby girl on the way that threw a wrench in things. So excited, Greg, to have you on Hospitable and get to chat with you today. So welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Now I'm glad we could finally get a time in the diary. And if you do hear some small screams or whimpers in the background, it is our new daughter Florence, who's 8 weeks old today. So thanks for taking the time.
Well, of course. Well, glad that we're able to make it happen. And, we were kind of chatting pre-show and as we kind of led into this about the impact that hospitality has. And so maybe talk a little about what is Saira and how did you come to join the company and get involved? And what was what was it that attracted you to this opportunity? And I know you're so passionate about what you're doing. So I'd love to maybe hear a little bit of the origin story of the company and then what drew you into stepping in as the COO the last couple of years.
Yeah, amazing. So Saira Hospitality is a global nonprofit, and we're creating pop-up hospitality schools around the world. We've been in existence now for 9 years, and I came on board 3 years ago to take a fantastic concept, which was created by our founder, Harsha Lakwa, and try and scale it a little bit and see if we can bring it to different destinations around the world. But going back to the start, the real impetus of it all was, as I say, our founder had a very interesting upbringing. To really wind it back, when she was younger, her father was a huge philanthropist in India and worked in Africa, and he was actually worked really closely with Mother Teresa. So our founder was brought up in this family where altruism, philanthropy was really, really strong and very ever present. But like a lot of us, she fell in love with luxury hospitality and didn't follow that route of philanthropy immediately. Instead, she kind of traveled around the world working for some of the world's best hotels, names like Six Senses and things like this. And it was here that the idea really came about for Saira Hospitality, because when she was traveling the world and visiting these hotels, she realized that all too often, when a new hotel was being developed, and they cleared the pre-opening budget and they were starting to look at the hiring, the entry-level resourcing of the teams, all too often the natural thing for those hotels, what they would do is they would fly in individuals from overseas who already had skills, training, experience, rather than literally looking outside the front doors of that hotel and seeking out local community members who would be a great fit. And this was a real problem for Harsha. She truly believed, again, due to her philanthropic background, opportunities should be given to local community members, and considering local community members as not having the right skills to work in a luxury lifestyle hotel is simply wrong. They may not have the experience because there's nothing out there at the moment or whatever it might be, but those experiences can be built if you're giving them the opportunity. So Harsha came up with the concept of, pretty revolutionary, but also very simple at the same time, just kind of creating these pop-up hospitality schools that would sit alongside the opening hotel. So we partnered with these hotels about 6 months before they opened, and we would be the kind of the one-stop shop to actually source local community members, screen those local community members to make sure they're the right fit for the brand about to open, and then crucially train those individuals in a kind of hybrid curriculum which focuses on experiential pieces, but a lot of the curriculum is really focused on life skills. So the things we know are super important in hospitality, from communication to emotional intelligence and leadership. So she came up with this idea while she was working with some of the biggest brands in the world, and decided to head over to Cornell University to really refine the idea. And then, she was doing that ever since. So she traveled all around the world, from Mexico, working with Four Seasons and Standard Hotels, to the British Virgin Islands, working with Richard Branson and Virgin Hotels. And the impact that she's managed to have, clearly focusing on the impact we can have on the community members and, the skills they develop and the roles that they get at the end of the program. But also I think her impact and the impact of Saira as a brand is also really meaningful on the hotel side as well, because it's a bit of a beacon for other brands to say, okay, well, there is another way to think about hiring and sourcing those entry level team members. We shouldn't just be poaching people anymore or flying people in from overseas. We should be giving people opportunities, because we're creating really brand loyal ambassadors for their hotel who we know will be incredible once they have, gotten up to the brand standards of the businesses we work with. And then I came on board around 3 years ago. You can tell by the accent, I'm in London. And really the impetus of that was COVID, as we all know, had a big impact on the hospitality industry, and Brexit in the UK as well, where so many European workers were, no longer able to remain in the country. We suddenly had this huge, people would call it a drought of talent, where they couldn't find anyone. There was no one interested in working in the industry. And Harsha, very smartly, she's from London originally, she realized that actually the same concept of Saira Hospitality would be super relevant for the problems that were forced upon us by those two black swan events. So rather than everybody fishing in the same pool, why aren't we creating talent rather than just endlessly searching and not being so successful? So it's been a joy for me over the past 3 years to take that global model and try and localize it somewhat and bring it to London on a more sustainable basis, I guess.
Nice. I love that. And so, when you were looking at the concept of the business and the mission, what was it that really made you want to say, yes, this is what I want to be able to do, and continue to create that? Was it the vision that really stuck out to you, or what was it that really was like, yeah, I want to be a part of this?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was, so I first met Harsha in 2021, and it was a bit of a unique way to meet her. I'd just come off the back of founding my own nonprofit during COVID, which was, I won't go into it too much, but it was a lot of the values aligned with Harsha's personal values and the values of Saira as a brand. So very briefly on that, we were a nonprofit called Nights on Us. And essentially we were a nonprofit organization that were offering luxury hotel stays to NHS workers, so healthcare workers in the UK, who were clearly going through a lot during the pandemic. We realized that hospitality is a transformative experience for so many people, and that was something that we needed in society, especially in the healthcare kind of industry at that time. Is we needed something that was transformative and invigorating and a light at the end of the tunnel, if you liked. So we started partnering with hotels in London and all across the UK to offer 2-night stays to NHS workers, usually trying to throw in a couple of treats and kind of, spa treatments or anything like that along the way, to make sure that when they did reopen, when the hotels finally could welcome guests again, they were able to give back in a meaningful way. And that was I'd worked in hospitality when I was younger. I'd never studied the industry. I've never been to college for anything like that. But I'd worked in hotels and bars and restaurants and things like that. And I'd always really valued the industry myself. But I think when founding Nights on Us and then starting to have conversations with hotels about this more philanthropic side of things, it became really, really clear to me that the industry it's almost set up. The word hospitality and the act of hospitality is all about helping people, and that line between supporting people and giving them an opportunity or giving them a light at the end of the tunnel or whatever it might be was something I was really passionate about exploring. And then not too long after starting Nights on Us, I was then introduced to Harsha by a friend because I was kind of looking for a more full-time role. Nights on Us was just kind of something on the side at the time. I was introduced to the concept of Saira after way too many drinks with a friend of mine on a night out in London, and I was instantly in love with the vision and the values of the business. And we made probably the wrong decision to try and call Harsha at about 1 a.m. to pitch me as their new director of partnerships at the time. Thankfully, she didn't pick up, but she was interested in having a conversation, which was great. So we caught up the next day, and as I say, the values of Harsha and I personally were super aligned, and I really loved what they were doing. So, and it just so happened that she was looking at the time for someone to help bring the brand and the values and the impact of the UK. So call it fate, Rob. I don't know, but it was one of those moments.
Yeah.
It was perfectly aligned.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you got to shoot your shot when you hear about something that excites you. 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe not the best idea after a few too many pints, but obviously it worked out and opened the door. So I think that's super cool, and it's always kind of fun when those things kind of like naturally happen. I always joke, how I ended up at OmniBoost is I met the founder, Case Zohra, because I was doing a sales talk during a program he was going through, and it was all about selling in the US. And I remember joking with him, and he told me, he's like, I'm going to hire you one day. And I'm like, all right, the amount of founders that I've worked with over 500 founders, and everyone likes to say that, but nothing ever really comes of it. Sometimes some work came out of it, whatever. And I end up, working with Case on some small projects and things. And then, 3 years later, he arrives back in New York, and he's like, hey, let's go grab dinner, and puts an offer down in front of me. And I was like, let's go, kind of, putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak. And those things happen. Like that's when that you find kind of something that really excites you in a way that you are passionate about. You just gotta take the leap and go after it. So I love that story and the origin of it. And it's clear that you're passionate about what you do from the multiple conversations we've had to, you've been on a couple of different podcasts, and, you've talked on different events and panels at some of the partners that you're doing stuff with. I think this is really cool. And you made a cool comment that I liked in talking about this. And I don't think we step back and think about this that much, but it's really easy to see is the impact that a hotel at any level, especially luxury hotels, right, has a huge impact on the community. It's bringing in events, it's bringing in people for an experience. And that can be in a major city, but that can also be in small towns. There's some amazing places in the world where you bring in these luxury type hotels, and it's one of a kind in a small town with not a lot to do, but everything to see, right? And that has a huge impact on the community. And it's really important for hotels and for the hospitality industry, restaurants and things to understand the impact on community. And it's really cool that you're working alongside that to create local jobs and local impact for that community in a way it should, because sometimes it doesn't always happen that way, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little about, you've got some really cool partnerships and doing these things. What is we're sitting here recording in Q4 or on the verge of Q4 2024. What does 2025 look like? What are some of the big things that you're excited about coming into 2025 before we get into kind of trends of the industry and to some of the depth on the technology and the impact that has with your programs? What are some of the trends that you're excited about in 2025, or maybe some programs that y'all have coming that you're really excited for next year?
Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. We, on the technology side, I'll be the first to admit that the Saira Hospitality curriculum previously hasn't been the most tech focused. But I think everywhere you look now, technology is becoming such a vital part of the industry, of so many industries, right? But hospitality, it can often be hard to know. Well, I'm sure when you're an operator, it can be very difficult to know where to start. But I think for us, integrating more insights to our students about the impact that hospitality tech can have on their careers is a really interesting one for us. And we're really excited to, continue some of the partnerships that we have in that vein, and also launching a few new ones as well. So we've been working with Mews for a while, who I think Richard's been on the podcast before, right? On Hospitable.
Yeah.
And
we work pretty closely with Mews on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So we know them well. And Richard sits in New York here, and him and I have recorded an episode and had a few good conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we really value the insight and the way that Mews approach the hospitality industry, and the partnership that we have together is really focused on celebrating the fact that automation, the right tech stack isn't just fantastic for the guests and fantastic for revenue and all of those things that you'll know way more than me about, but it's also crucial for the teams, right? Because it means that if you are able to automate and simplify some of the more mundane or less human tasks in a hotel, that frees up so much headspace and so much actual time for the teams to celebrate and deliver great hospitality, and practice active listening on the front desk rather than having their heads down the whole time, tapping away. And I think when we first met Richard and we heard about what they were up to over at Mews, we very quickly realized that the philosophy that they had was super aligned with ours, despite being completely different businesses, clearly. So we have a really exciting partnership with Mews. We've already launched one school in London together with them, and the concept there being, what if we could create a school that's specifically working with Mews properties, so working with Mews customers who end up being the hiring partners of the school that we create. So the function being, Saira Hospitality takes all of the heavy lifting in terms of finding local community members in London. We're working a lot in London specifically with overlooked and marginalized communities, so a lot of work with refugees, previously homeless individuals. So we go out and we'll find those great individuals by partnering with other charities and nonprofits. We then screen them and we train them. The exciting part is we're then able to integrate Mews and the Mews University platform into our training itself, knowing that when those candidates and graduates come through the program, they're going to be hired by a Mews hotel on the other side, and they already know, what is a PMS, so much more. They understand how to actually, they've gone through the modules that they need to. So they've been benefiting from the life skills that we can deliver, but there's also then that quite tangible technology piece. So they're already a step above the rest who maybe are, applying for roles and they've never had that kind of training. And I think integrating technology at that level, because we typically, if you take a cross section of our candidates that we work with in London, the vast majority have never worked in hospitality, maybe never stepped foot inside a hotel. So if you're able to, at that really early stage, give them an understanding of how important technology can be, hopefully they'll stay with that Mews property for a long time. But it also means that as they grow into their career, they already have this kind of foundation of technology, which we know is only going to become more important in the future. So I think when I first came on board 3 years ago, we've got a little module that talks about what's a PMS, what's an ATS, and things like that. It was very light touch. Now, with the help of Mews, we're able to actually truly integrate, full learning and understanding of how important it is to the industry.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool because, at a hotel, on average, they're using 8, 9, 10 different systems, from your PMS to your point of sale to your accounting platforms to revenue management, forecasting, planning, and budgeting, inventory management, staff planning. There's so many events, and then you have all of your OTAs that sit on top of it, and all the different things that it can really stack up. And so if you're going to be working in that space, it's really important to understand how the technologies can play, and the hospitality tech space is huge, and there's so many companies, and not everyone always plays nice in the sandbox or doesn't always have the integration piece to do it, which is where our data unification platform comes in. But it's really interesting that has become a big piece of it, because we talk about, AI as a buzzword, right? And there's automation, and AI and automation is not meant to replace. It's meant to help automate those things that can be automated so that you can focus on the bigger critical tasks and the actual guest experience, which is what I think is really cool. And so being able to add that into to really create more hospitable experiences and really drive that guest experience. And that's what makes a hotel, right? When you step into a hotel, be it, you know, a roadside inn on your travel to a super luxury, you're looking for a specific experience.
Mm.
And each layer has a different experience that you're expecting when you're traveling for work or you're traveling for a vacation or whatnot. And being able to create that experience at all those different levels is super impactful. So I think it's cool that they're working into that. And it's really cool that you're putting more focus on that next year because it's such a big piece to the hotel landscape. You know, the old school way is, you know, all the different codes and keys and you're checking this and being able to make it super easy to find reservations, make it super easy to check people in, make that process as smooth as possible. This is the last thing you want to do after getting off a long flight and you have to spend 20 minutes at the check-in desk to have them not be able to find your reservation or your room not ready. And it's just like, I just want to get to my room. I want to relax for a minute and blah, blah, blah. Right. So the faster you can get that process, the better, right? No one likes to, to wait in a hotel lobby for 20, 30, 45 minutes
Totally.
just to get checked into the room that you're expecting to be in.
No, 100%. I think, you know, there are still, I still have conversations with maybe individuals who are less open to technology being so ever present in hotels, and you know they worry about people, you know, replacing teams and you know people losing their jobs. But I think again, you know, working with the right partners or the right types of technology being included in the tech stack, it isn't about that. It's about just enriching the experience for everyone, from the guests to the teams, which we know is, you know, I think everyone's now more focused on making sure their teams are happy and fulfilled than ever, which is great. And yeah, I think, you know, even on the other side there, from the partnerships that we're crafting with technology businesses as well, we see it as a chance to kind of help vendors to differentiate one another as well, because you know, and again, you'll know more than I do about the depth and breadth of just how many vendors or you know tech brands there are out there. But I think what's really smart and interesting with the Mews collaboration is they're able to really clearly identify that they're able to support their customers from a hiring perspective as well, right? So we know all the buzzwords and all of the big conversations in hospitality. Yes, technology is one, employment, retention. We know that you know will probably always be something because it's a human element. But I think if as a technology company you're able to say we're supporting a nonprofit and we're also able to say to our customers we're bringing in newly trained teams who are impassioned by our tech but also your brand, you start to solve two problems. You're still solving the technology problem. You're also supporting the staffing problem as well, which sadly is, keeps us busy. Sadly, we have to continue creating these schools because there are so many gaps and there are so many local communities that need skills and kind of a sense of belief. But yeah, working with those types of partners, that's what really, really motivates me as well, is to look outside of purely just working with operators, because for a long time we would partner directly with the hotels and say, great, you know, help sponsor a program and we'll find the right teams for you. But I think this revolution that we're going through with technology at the moment opens so many more doors for brands to think creatively and think, okay, well, yeah, I have my integration partnerships, but how can I also support nonprofits and also people and teams and all of those great things? So I think it's a really exciting time. Hard to know where to start with technology. I've listened to so many audiobooks about it and I still get mixed up with all the acronyms, but I'm not a tech
guy. Yeah, you know, it's a crazy world out there and it continues to evolve. And I think the impactful piece is that, you know, can you really solve the core problem of one, upskilling members of the community so that they can be impacted and impactful in their community at that level, working for hotels and hospitality. But the sheer fact of it is that retention is always going to be a thing. And when we look at hospitality industry as a whole, frontline workers, you know, it's very transient at times, and that's an okay thing. That's kind of by nature, by design. And in the past, you would have somebody leave the front desk, and you would lose all that product knowledge of the product codes and the hotkeys and everything. this actually creates that seamless transition so that you always know that that guest experience is going to be, you know, the same, right? There's the fluidity of it that whether Greg or Rob or Sam or Jen is working the front desk, the guests are going to get the same level of experience and the same level of guest experience and hospitality and rapport that you're looking for. And that's, I think, really cool and such an impactful piece of the curriculum that y'all are building. And it's really interesting to see because it's easy to work with the operators. How do you work with tech partners? And then how do you turn more tech partners into this impactful space, which is, I think everybody's looking through that. Everyone wants to make an impact in the community. They want to give back. I think every company wants to be, we went through the whole corporate sustainability and corporate responsibility and all those things. It's really hard to put that into practice. It's easy to talk about these things, hard to put into practice. And what y'all are building and what have built is a way to really bring in partners to show those things in a very impactful way that also solves a key problem in staffing, training, upskilling, skill sets, et cetera. And I think that's really cool and something that can get lost in all of this and something that brands really need to think about is how do you continue to make an impact not only in the local community, but the community at large that you're servicing? And I think businesses at every level, this is a struggle, right? You run a business to make money and do different things, and you want to give back and you want to impact it. It's hard to think about where can we do that and how can we do that. And so having programs available to us to do that really, I think is overlooked. And there's so many things out there that you can do to get involved to reduce the need to do everything yourselves. And that's a really cool problem and solutions that are being built, right?
Yeah, yeah, and what I found out very quickly when I was exploring not just those operational or hotel operator partnerships, but anything external is, as you mentioned, most people or many people do want to do the right thing. It's just how do you take your focus off profitability and all of these other things, which there's so much pressure on that. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad, but I understand that it's super hard for people to say, okay, well, let's spend X amount of hours a year or week or month with a nonprofit like Saira. And so really what we had to do is find ways to craft these partnerships to make sure that they made sense and impacted the rest of the businesses that we work with. So again, whether it's helping brands find the right talent whilst also giving back, that's a huge win. So that's how we're layering these partnerships, certainly more next year as well, to find more technology businesses that we can support that can also help support us change some lives at the same time.
I love that. It's such a cool piece of the puzzle. When you look at technology trends in the hospitality space, you talked about partnering with Mews and Mews University. When you think about this from a skill perspective or a curriculum perspective, how do you go about setting up curriculum? Is that something that you all have done? Is it a co-curriculum with maybe the partner that you're building? Or is the curriculum all the same? Like talk to me a little about your curriculum and how it's built or how it's maybe also flexible depending on the type of partner that you are working with.
Yeah, so the curriculums, we could spend a whole 2 hours on it because it's just there's so many incredible elements there. But we have a base of 8 modules that we include in pretty much every school that we run. But then we're also always tweaking and changing depending on which hotel partners we're working with. So when we're running projects in the British Virgin Islands, we were working with a hotel that needed stable hands. That was one of the individuals to work with the horses and clean the stables and all of those things. And we just did not have that curriculum. It wasn't the first thing I think our founder thought of when she started piecing it all together. So yeah, we have the benefit really these days of having a really strong network again of people who have worked in the industry for decades and really want to help impart their own knowledge to the new generation. Mm-hmm. So when we do come across something like that, when we need some specialist curriculum to be integrated, we'll kind of, cast our net out and have some conversations with people we know might be able to help and point us in the right direction of someone who's a stable hand expert, kind of equestrian expert, and then piece that together. So yeah, we tweak it depending on the project. Here in London, we have a really stable 4-week curriculum, which we've now worked with enough trainers, and we have curriculum directors around the world. So we'll have check-ins with them to make sure that what we're teaching is still relevant, and is still hasn't gone out of date or hasn't been kind of is still the most impactful piece that we can. And the really exciting thing about doing these global projects is that every time we create a new project in a new city or a new rural destination, we always work with local trainers on the ground. So we then sit down with the trainers before we get to the point of delivering the curriculum, and we'll talk them through what we do and the different modules and each of the playbooks that we have, because it's quite a large structure of a curriculum. And then we start to get local insights from those trainers as to, well, okay, how might that land with residents in the BVIs versus Namibia versus London versus Akron, Ohio versus wherever we're doing these programs. And that really helps us. No two destinations are the same. The benefit I have a little bit, or we have it here in London, is that we're able to, because we're kind of ever present now in London, we're doing a lot of these programs, we can start to really distill and create this really core piece, which then we can work with partners like Mews to then enrich it here. And we've got a really exciting technology partnership which we've been running a little bit this year, but we're going to do much more with them next year. And it's super simple. It's with a business called Vizzy, VIZZY, and they're essentially kind of like I don't know how they would want me to describe them, but the anti-CV or anti-resume company, because they know that, especially it's so relevant for us because, a lot of the candidates we're working with, they don't have the traditional experiences. They don't have a curriculum, a traditional resume that they can just hand over at the point of interview or anything like that. So they really start to be left behind because they don't have skills. Well, they don't have experience. They do have skills. It's just maybe how do you get them on paper? So Vizzy is essentially an online platform, it takes candidates through a different way to express themselves outside of a traditional resume. So there's psychometric testing, and there's ways to upload media and experiences and all of these things that actually truly, when you're looking to hire someone on a front of house or a front facing basis, you're much more interested in who they are as a person and their personality than what they studied at school 10 years ago, I think. So it's how can we work with those, again, technology partners to say, we've been teaching people how to write resumes for 9 years. We actually don't think it's relevant. We don't think, and there's a little bit of catching up to do, of course, because hotels still want to see resumes. So we can, turn it into a PDF and still send it over. But for the more forward-thinking hotels, now we can say, actually, you do want a CV or a resume. Here's a link to Rob's personal profile. It's still got his experience. It's still got his background and education, but actually it's a bit more interactive, and you can actually get a feel for who he is as a person. Maybe he's uploaded a video of him, doing karaoke. I don't know. Yeah, so you can get a chance to actually.
Definitely not a karaoke
guy. But yeah, like that's an opportunity again to leverage technology just to make our candidate journey much more seamless into employment, which is really the aim of the game for us.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really cool. You bring up this need. I mean, I worked as a recruiter, an agency recruiter for 10 years, and there's so much really cool stuff about application tracking systems and whatnot, but it's also hard at times, and the hiring process is hard. There's so many things to look at, from raw skills to soft skills to experiences in non-traditional versus traditional paths, and the experience you get from traveling abroad or doing multiple jobs or different things. It's really hard to always quantify or qualify that. And so, having these opportunities to really show the personality and give more to who you are than just on paper, and like the full picture of what you can bring to the table is really cool. So I think it's really cool how you do that with those, the local communities and marginalized communities and different things, to really upskill that and bring that to the light is something that, staffing and recruiting and that whole industry, it's similar problems every decade and continued steps to be made. But the hiring process is hard. You just never know. It's one of those things that's the hardest thing to do, and it's super cool when there's innovation out there that's helping make that a better process, a smoother process, and more impactful process. So I love it. And the curriculum thing is super cool as well. You talk about, you start thinking about the world today and the resorts and the experiences we could have traveling the world, like so many things. I didn't even think about, like, oh yeah, they could have a stable on site. So there's horseback riding, or, there's a marina for all the water sports and all those things that you have to kind of add in to all these resorts, and resorts continue to get bigger and more creative of what experience do you get when you show up at this hotel. Sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's everything, right? And so super fun, and I can only imagine it's a challenge day in and day out to to continue learning, but also one that is fun for that continuous learning process. So I think that's really exciting, and I think there's so much I would love to chat with you for hours. I mean, we have chatted for hours in multiple conversations. But as we kind of wrap this up, as you're looking at next year, what are you looking for, and how can this community help you, and where can they find y'all to learn more about what you're building?
Yeah, thanks so much. So people can find us. You can find me on LinkedIn is probably a good way to start. I'm usually on there. You can visit our website, sairahospitality.com, and we're just at Saira Hospitality on Instagram as well. But really next year, as a lot of the conversation's been focused on today, it's how can we start to partner with, yes, technology businesses, yes, hotels, but brands that we feel are aligned with the vision that we have and the impact that we're having, and really want to help support by giving back to those communities that we're getting into these roles. And I think for me, technology is a really, really important part of that, because as we've been talking about, there's so much crossover and so many ways that we can benefit personally, selfishly at Saira Hospitality for our students by learning what else our candidates need to know from a technology perspective before they move into the industry. So we have this great PMS partnership with Mews, but there are so many other facets, as we've talked about. How can we partner more with technology businesses to help upskill, the talent of tomorrow, which is really what we're all about. And if there are any technology businesses out there who are thinking, okay, I'm starting to plan for 2025, hopefully there's an ESG question mark somewhere, or hopefully it's not a question mark. Hopefully it's a true statement or an objective. If in any way it's partnering with a nonprofit in the hospitality space, we'd love to speak to you, because I think there are so many ways that we can intersect. And personally, for me, again, it's never been a big focus on my role in the past, but I'm really enjoying getting to know people in the technology space, because again, I often find that you guys are great problem solvers, and I think if we look at problems together from a nonprofit perspective and a technological perspective, you can start to find really interesting answers to some of the big questions that we all have. So always here for a conversation about that. And if anybody's, in London, we're always running programs as well. We're always looking for people to just come and volunteer some time, help meet with our candidates, help interview our candidates. And I think we find that that's a really nice launching off point as well for brands. They'll say, okay, cool, we like what you do, we like you on paper, let's go and see what's actually happening. So we can invite them to the school and they can come and, help with a few of the operational pieces that we have here. And we typically find there's a lot of happy tears and laughter when we get people along to volunteer, because some of the candidates most of the candidates we happen to be helping are just fantastically inspirational individuals, and to see them go from the initial screening process to then graduating and getting their first career in hospitality is something I certainly will never get bored of. So if you're interested in seeing that in person, then hit me up for that as well.
Love that. Well, I'll make sure to link your LinkedIn profile, the website, and the Instagram page all in the show notes. All you got to do is tap those show notes and you'll have the links right there. So it takes you right there to talk to Greg. Greg, man, this was a lot of fun, and excited to see what we can do together and be involved in your community and see the continued growth of Saira in your role and the impact that y'all are making. And that's something that I think is just amazing. So appreciate having you on the podcast. Looking forward to further amazing things that y'all do and the impact that you're creating in communities. So keep up the good work. And thank you again for joining the podcast, my friend.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed that. Thanks, Rob.
You bet. Awesome. This has been another episode of Hospitable. As always, if you liked it and you want to be a tier 1, please like, subscribe, rate, review, do all those things. If you want to get in touch with Greg, go talk to him. If you want to get in touch with us, you know where to find us. If you want to be on the podcast or know something should be on the podcast or have topics that should be on the podcast, let us know. We're always here for y'all. Until next episode, stay well. Thank y'all.